Well, it looks like our auto recording is working. That's good.
Did you find the one from last week? Phil, were you able to find the one from last week? Well, I guess the TOB call.
So the setting was off. So I just turned it on when we had that email discussion.
Ah.
It was not auto recording.
The little light wasn't green last week. It was red. It was green the whole time, not red.
Yeah, when I joined, it immediately showed recording. So I think we have it working now.
And I intentionally didn't kick you off. It said the meeting was already in progress. Now realizing what that means is that Phil and I are a little too racy.
Common computer science problem.
Okay. Man, it's not to be confused with the containers that we all work with, but there's a couple of plugins for Firefox for having all your tabs in containers now. And I've been using them for the last 2.5 months or something. And one of them I've been using for a while, but one of them, a couple of extra ones have only been for the last 2.5 months, and they have revolutionized my browser workflow. I love it.
They're super good. We have one that integrates with the tool that we use for logging into AWS accounts. Mm-hmm. So I can have a Firefox container that corresponds to an individual account.
Oh, an individual account even. That's nice. Yeah, I've got a few of them that are like LinkedIn. Anytime I open LinkedIn, it automatically jumps into a container that's only sandboxed for that one, and GitHub and so forth. Particular accounts would be neat too. But every time I open a new tab, it starts a temporary, like a clean slate container, and after nothing's using that container, it reaps it in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So every container is like complete. Every tab is completely unaware of every other tab, cookies and all. Mm-hmm. All right. Who wants to share this meeting? And since we're already starting, I guess the only thing with this auto record, Phil, is it will have a little bit more lead time on the beginning of the video rather than being choosy.
Yeah, I think you in the Zoom app you can grab the file and then probably just cut off the start.
That's cool. So we can go ahead and get started. And I'll say also, Phil, is exciting. I got like a flurry of activity from Crosby today, so he's back on the scene. So that's
nice. Very good.
All right, you're first up, Phil. Take it away.
Yeah, so I will keep this brief, but if people want to ask more detailed questions, there's a range of us from the TOB on this call already, so we can field specifics. If you look at today's call, I have a link to another HackMD, which has notes from our Monday late day TOB call. The purpose of that call was to effectively move toward, we have two project proposals that I think people are aware of. Oraz and Umochi proposed to be added to the OCI. The TOB call was not to jump directly to those proposals, but given we have new seats just filled on the TOB, to talk a little bit of history, a little bit about voting process and proposals. And then I'd say 80% of that call was really discussing that we need to develop a framework to handle proposed project additions to the OCI. And the reason being, for those that haven't been around for 4+ years, you know, the early days of the OCI, you know, if you read through the governance, I think it becomes fairly clear that the expectation is that it would really stay quite tightly scoped around the specs. And again, the initial specs were runtime and image, and Run C as that default implementation of the runtime spec. A few projects came along, I would say less than one a year, because, you know, we really only have a few early kind of testing / conformance examples around image tools and runtime tools, which were meant to solve specific issues in those early days of the spec development, as far as having kind of a framework for interacting with the specs. And then we have SE Linux and Go Digest, which are more helper, very, very simple helper libraries to help you fill out or use, you know, very specific parts of the spec, like assembling digests and assembling the proper SE Linux pieces of the spec. So given that, it was important for us to take a step back and you know, make sure that proposers are aware that the OCI has a very different vision and scope than the CNCF, and we want to make sure that we don't make these decisions based on popularity, based on, hey, this is really nice code, but really have a very specific set of criteria, given we have nowhere near the staff, we don't have the marketing, we don't have the you know, organization of the CNCF to actually do project management. And that may sound silly for something small or something that seems like just a helper tool, but you have to think forward a year or two. What if there are no more maintainers for that project? Now the OCI TOB has to figure out, how do we archive this? What do we do with it? Do we give it back to someone else? So anyway, we're trying to be careful before we step into just making sort of off-the-cuff decisions on projects. So hopefully no one's deeply offended, you know, that we're taking a little bit of caution here first. If you go read those notes and scroll down, there's a start of an attempt to think about project types, you know, things that exist in the OCI already. So our goal is to have kind of a filter and then actually test what exists already and some of these proposals against this and say, is this what we wanted? Does this make sense? And, you know, what's the value of a project coming into the OCI versus standing on its own or going a different direction? So yeah, bear with us as we try and nail that. We have a target of maximum 3 weeks to kind of hammer this out and revisit it. So we hope not to drag our feet on this for a long time, but that was the bulk of our discussion. So I'll leave it at that. And again, if there are any specific questions, you know, we can do it offline, or I'm sure Vincent or Steve or anyone's happy to discuss that now. And hearing quiet, I'll assume maybe folks want some time to digest that, I definitely recommend going and reading those notes if you want to read a little more about our thought process there.
Sounds to me like it was an extremely productive call.
I thought so. I hope everyone else did. It was good to
Honestly,
think through those
it was
topics.
it was fairly meaty the whole time.
Yep. So what's next? Probably should go to Josh's, which is a specific item.
Yeah, I just wanted to run through a few conformance questions. Can you hear me all right? I'm in a coffee shop.
Yeah, you're good.
Great.
Yep.
So the big one is the bottom one, the number 3. I should have put it at number 1. Is this ongoing discussion that John started regarding the delete endpoint. And I think that Derek had a really good suggestion about the new, how the spec should be updated to address that. And Peter actually opened a pull request against the conformance test to match what Derek's comment described. So just wondering if we can get some eyes on that, or if there's any thoughts on that delete endpoint in general.
Okay. I will take a look. I'll try and correct that address also. It looks like.
Yeah, there's a bad link too. So.
I mean, I think there was obviously registries want to be able to support deleting tags. So I don't think we want to say the conformance says you must fail a tag delete, which, but I think there was a good topic of, can we break this up into some, a specific list? I was kind of using the ski trail list kind of idea.
Yeah. So Steve, so that's actually my the number 1 item.
Gotcha.
So that's sort of a separate, discussion topic, but this is, for that specific endpoint, we're trying to figure out what are the acceptable error codes. And I think what we came up with was 202 accepted. Peter, are you on?
Yeah, 202 accepted, 405 method not allowed, or 400 with the specific error code unsupported.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess there's not much to discuss here, but I think we do have a proposed solution for that specific endpoint. What Steve is mentioning is what's being talked about on the mailing list topic that Derek and Ram have had some comments about. And again, deferring to Derek's comments, I think he had one that was broke the distribution spec into 4 main categories, the most important one being the pool operation. And so I guess what I'm going to suggest is that conformance or certification against OCI means that you support in full the pool, what's laid out for conforming with pool, and then the other 3 topics could maybe denote some sort of extra OCI support. So I don't know if there's anyone who has thoughts on that.
Sorry, I was just reading the end of 102 and merging 105. I'll go back to where you're at. Now, are you talking about the breaking down of the categories bit?
Yeah. So right now it's.
I think that I thought that was how it was already kind of broken down, but it is interesting to like, rather than just doing an API level check, to actually group them into workflows. I don't know how that works.
Right,
as
totally.
written them. Or what all have worked on.
Yeah,
wasn't
but
I was just saying, the workflows is a higher level concept, which I think is good. Like when we first looked at the conformance test, there's just this red and green. And then if you look a little closer, there's a quantity, and it's not really qualitative. It's just not arbitrary. It's obviously a finite number. And what does it really mean? So the thought was, can we break them down into a set of, here's the APIs that pass and fail, and then we could discuss whether something should actually fail, or like the delete API should support different responses. Because I think I put it in this one where I basically said, look, for a public registry, we probably don't want delete to happen, because then we wind up in this NPM kind of scenario where everybody's tools break and because something got deleted. So certain registries might have different behavior, but the fact that a registry doesn't page, for instance, or I don't know, pick another arbitrary thing in there that's not the end of the world, should a registry look red, or should it just be like, hey, it's, here's this one item that they either haven't supported yet, or it isn't really that important because I don't need it as a customer that's looking at these conformance tests.
Yeah, and I think to me, the reasons are clear why a certain registry wouldn't support certain endpoints, and I think that that's fair. So what I think a good suggestion is that there's 4 tests, there's 4 green or reds. If you pass the first one, which is pool, your overall status is green. But people could dive in and see just how much of the spec you're supporting. But all registries should support a pool operation of an OCI image.
Well, that's certainly one tactic. Another tactic is just to, clearly define where may language is going to be used in the specification rather than must language, right? I mean, in other words, if we're going to allow some, delete not to be used, then it's okay for it to only, may be used, not, you don't have to, right? Certainly the pull is the
right
thing we're doing here.
Yeah, and that would be easy enough just to mark certain tests as required to pass. But I don't know. I think there's value in categorizing the endpoints into higher level groups versus just looking at the may versus must language of the spec. I think it's harder to follow.
Well, I mean, if it's a green if it says may and it doesn't, right?
Or
sure.
That's a good point.
Pass or fail. Last time.
Well, you've got 2 different types of fail then, right, Vince? You've got one that says it's not applicable.
That's when we talked about this at some point of like most of the test framework is written as a Boolean, and really the may is a third option.
Right.
So if it does do it, great, it's green. If it fails a may, then it probably shouldn't be red.
Right, but yeah, I don't know why I wouldn't use yellow either. Maybe blue,
just gray. If it's a may and I don't know, we can get to the colors.
That's fair.
So just not applicable.
If it's a may and it fails, just skip it.
Yeah.
But I do think it's worth calling out.
It's going to be important for somebody to look in a table, right, to see which ones are supported and not.
Yeah, I do think it's important for us to call out what registries support what APIs, so that people that are writing tools are trying to do a certain behavior on a certain registry. And maybe in the test results, a registry can specify, put a comment, hey, we don't support this for this reason, delete, for instance, on Docker Hub, or paging, but we support this other API because we believe it's better, or I don't know, whatever. But at least give registries an opportunity to explain why or where something like might be somewhere else.
I think if it's an optional behavior, by definition, it isn't required. So a registry that doesn't implement an optional behavior should still show up as conformant. It should still show up as green. And yeah, there may need to be something that says this optional feature is not supported, but that's not something that says it's not conformant with the specification.
Agreed. I wasn't trying to say it should be red. That's a good point.
I mean, maybe to Sam's point, like what we can maybe do is have environment variables that check for extra stuff, like blob deletion, like enable some environment variable before running the test, and it will run those tests. Otherwise, it just doesn't even. And so the baseline would be the subset that would be all the musts that would make you conform.
Yeah, that very fair. Right.
Okay.
Is the environment variable a way for you to keep a test from running and producing a failure? Is that what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, I just think if your environment table is clean of any OCI underscore extra test one, it just runs the baseline. Otherwise, each additional feature set, you know, and those we can break into categories. But yeah, I don't want to spend way too much time, and I'm happy to have one-offs about this. The only other topic I had regarding conformance is did want to release the binary as a container image, and I was curious if Open Containers already has some robot account on either Quay or Hub or anywhere else.
I don't think we have a namespace anywhere today.
Is there a person to work with to get a Quay login or a Docker Hub login, or is there an opinion on one or the other? Is it...
I mean, hold on.
What about GitHub package registry? I mean, GitHub package registry being associated with the repo.
Yeah, I forgot about that one actually.
And I think I actually,
I don't know if they've got features where it ties it into the permissions of the.
No, it should actually tie right into the GitHub Actions.
Or you could just build the.
Quay. I think I actually reserved the OCI org on Quay.
Cool. You could also just have a build for it, right? And use private.
Yeah, no, I guess I wanted to provide a public image for people to use that didn't require you grabbing the binary.
Do you have a login to Quay?
I have my own account. Yeah.
I have the OCI organization.
Yeah, go ahead. Give me admin on that. No, I don't know.
But just from a location perspective, you know, now that GitHub does have their registry, is there a reason we would send them somewhere else when everything's in one place?
No, I think that's a great call. I can explore what that looks like. Yeah, go ahead.
My experience with GitHub's package registry is that it kind of falls apart if you're not doing versioned artifacts.
They're learning. We've been talking with them. This was one of the things that I was kind of been questioning. We've been having a couple of conversations around like when would you put something on GitHub package registry versus in your registry that's close to your deployment. And so I was trying to find some opportunities where actually it does make sense as opposed to kind of pitching against them. So I thought this was a good example. And if they are not doing something, it'd be great for this team that knows more about containers and stuff to be able to help them along.
Yeah, so I forgot all about the GitHub one. I can see if that works, but I think it'd be nice if people could just do Docker run or podman run this thing that's released every time there's a commit to distribution spec build a new version of this. That's all I have.
I think this was the one where we give you all the time left, Vincent, to scrub through the backlog.
To clean house.
Get out
Most
the
exciting
dustbuster.
thing. Man, I love it. I'm just looking at who can I add to, who I can add to what teams. I don't know how to do team management on Quay, but I'll figure that out later. What's that? Nobody's taking notes. Yep. Yeah, because it's kind of goofy, but I actually set up the Quay.io OCI thing some time ago because when I went to go do some release for one of the specs, I realized that like the specs people wanted an HTML and PDF, and I was generating it using this Pandoc, and it was like some Pandoc from a Fedora thing built like back in 2015 and 2016, and it was like Docker.io, VBATs, Pandoc, and that was like one of those moments when you think computers are terrible, because I couldn't get the same Pandoc to generate the same PDF on any newer versions of Fedora or on Ubuntu or anything else, and so I was like, this really shouldn't live under my name, under some archaic. Oh my gosh. So there's actually a Quay.io OCI Pandoc that I was hoping to migrate things to at some point. But right. Thing for another day. So this my anchor for housekeeping things is really not very exciting, and I'm sure a lot of people are welcome to drop off or participate. It's something that we used to do more often as we were approaching release times for any one of the releases. And it seems to work best when we just have like a burn down list of issues, or what's the final things to get out of the way for like a 1.0. So I know that you have enumerated a few things, Steve, here lately on the distribution spec.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And so if you'll start thinking of just a few of those, like I'll paste here in the notes, clean house.
You're saying I left some mess
Something
behind
like
too?
distribution spec here, and then like just
Image specs.
runtime spec. The reason
Was
I
it
was thinking
runtime
about
or image?
What?
I thought it was image and distribution.
yeah, sure, but runtime needs a release also, and I'll touch.
Oh, I see.
I'm just literally giving like these as markers of places that everybody on the call, please take a minute and go to one of these things that you might see has something that is of relevance, and this is kind of this is not a observer's activity here. This is like an invitation to get involved at this point.
No spectators. We actually want somebody to do something.
Yeah, honestly, and so okay, so in the way that this has worked in the past pretty well, and this is great because we have like 30 minutes. Get your hands a little bit dirty, because I think we have a few folks on the call that could LGTM things, but even if you're just a spectator and you have some involvement in something and you have reviewed or see like an issue or a PR in one of these that is open, that you can say like, this is interesting or this is no longer relevant. Like today, I just something linked to something that was like, we're not going to do that. Like it was 3 or 4 years old, and it was just kind of a brainstorm. Not going to happen. So just like cleaning house.
Yeah.
Say what?
One of Alexi's has been closing a few. Good.
I mean, these kind of things. Yeah, babe, you can run up there, but like literally come right back. Okay. the reason that I was thinking about runtime spec is because even though the runtime spec has a 1.0 out there, there's a few things that are kind of non-breaking changes for the spec side, and some that are like queued up for Run C as well. And while we don't have a lot of Run C maintainers on the call right now, quorum enough to do anything there, Run C has been in release candidate stage for like 5 years. And a few of these conversations have actually come to close here recently, like the hooks. And so we tried to have the release for the spec so that it would have a official version of the spec so that Run C could close out the conversation and have a official 1.0 of Run C. And then that's when about a month and a half ago, we addressed the fact that we had maintainers that weren't active. Because the vote for the spec release didn't happen because we only had 4 out of 8, not a 2/3 majority. So we addressed that issue, and in the meantime, people saw like, oh, there's about to be a release of the runtime spec. Here's a list of things that are like 1 LGTM out of 2 that would be cleanup and need to go in. So these kind of cleanups are good to have, and it helps. Particularly the one that H. Ventinari, I don't know who. I don't think he's ever joined a phone call, but he's been helpful here lately. So like right here, nobody's added anything yet, but like right here in the runtime specs, I just added a link to an issue comment where it was fairly nicely itemized of, you know, on a issue of like, please tag a new release. That here's a few things that just need to be reviewed and or pushed through, and he's keeping a pretty neat list, or they're keeping a pretty neat list that would be good to get into a spec release. So while the distribution spec is ready for a 1.0, I think some of this, like this is we're now on the period of cleanup of like, what are these things that either need to be just closed, or if I need to create a label for like, this needs a back burner label, like post 1.0 or pre 1.0, I can create labels right now. If people will look through those issue lists right now, like actively on this call, and comment and then paste a link to it, then I or one of the maintainers can go through and properly sort it and be like, okay, this looks like it needs to be closed, or this is a post 1.0, we don't have to let it be noise on our radar, or this is something that just needs a little bit of review and get merged.
How do you want to do things that we don't want in 1.0, for instance, but we want to, like the search requirement? It's obviously not a 1.0. We never meant it to be a 1.0. I can't edit the labels, so I don't know how you want to handle something like that.
The label, let me open up the image spec.
This happened to me, the distribution spec. It was number 71.
Gosh, we made too many labels, honestly, in the image spec, but there was a...
Oh, you're looking for a reference?
Low-hanging fruit or priority, maybe. You get one image spec. We had a v1 dot next, maybe. Hashtag maybe. So what do you think would be most helpful? Like
maybe v next to.
Let's say what?
As far as what labels?
Yeah, like because right now, if you go to distribution spec /labels, there's only like 8, but none of them are kind of the post 1.0 consideration, like a conversation for post 1.0.
Yeah, I guess I think the thing that comes to most mind is we should have one that is targeted for 1.0. These are the ones that we want to triage to figure out, are we going to put it in 1.0 before we declare it? And then there's the ones that we
have
know are later.
milestones. So for that, we could just add things to milestones.
Oh, I see.
We have 2 milestones. We have a V10 next, and we have a V10 RC1, which is, I guess, kind of squishy, but that's like, needs to be a release consideration for the candidate. Does that make sense? So either label it, or we could put it in a milestone and then just work on burning down that milestone.
Silly question. Who's supposed to have edits for milestones and labels?
Oh, well, so if you think this is a consideration, just you can comment or post a link here or something
Gotcha.
like that, and I or whoever has rights to do it can do that.
I think I just commented an issue of someone on the call. 85 talks about will be, should be, must, should, may. I think.
Can you paste a link in the HackMD?
Yeah, I think it's covered by issue 27, so I think that might be a dupe. But verify that.
On which one?
Distribution specs. I'll put it in HackMD as well.
Mm-hmm.
So effectively 85 is saying there should be some formalization of these will be. And that's also something Mike commented in the very last comment of his issue, I think.
Yeah, just from the point of view of writing the tests, it's a lot easier if we know specifically if that will be something that definitely part of the spec and must be implemented, or if it's just something that's suggested that would be in May. So wherever we can clarify that language, it definitely helps us out.
Yep.
Yeah, and I was actually wrong, Peter. That's your comment at the end of Mike's issue 27. So yeah, makes sense.
So should I have not closed it just now?
No, I think we only need one issue open that covers that topic, and I'm suggesting maybe 27 covers that as well. But Peter, if you think there's something unique, feel free to clarify that.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah, there are really 2 points to these test buckets, right? One is to find issues with the registries, and the other is to clean up the specification so that the specification is clean for most of the registries that are widely being used. Yeah, I guess we need to skim through and see what you mean by the will be. We shouldn't have language like that.
Open a PR. Do it right now.
Yeah, will be is inappropriate language for specifications.
it just blows my mind. Some of these, like, Tiana, you're on the call, but do we have any other runtime spec maintainers on the call? Crosby. Nope. For some way, somehow we ended up with 3 checks for DCO signatures on runtime spec, and they don't all agree with each other. We've got a PR out there, and only Tiana and I have commented on it. It's pretty great.
Yeah, I see all the will be's. Yeah, that's just not. In almost every case so far that I've seen, it looks like it's a must.
God bless anybody who watches this on YouTube later.
This is some exciting stuff, y'all.
This is one of those where you just have to have music in the background and
everybody's reading. Yeah.
It's okay. I joined about 5 minutes early to give them some excitement to set the stage for how empty this call was going to be.
Nice.
At least we don't have that fantastic hold music with whatever. What was that? UberConf. Oh my gosh.
Oh man, that was so good. I love that music. I'd stay on just to listen to it.
Well, here's one that I haven't had much comment on. Phil or Mike, either one of y'all prepared to discuss? I've had a lot of good discussions here with Brandon Loom, but with this 775 about
the encrypted layers.
Because it looks like even John Johnson is doing something with it with Google, some Google code base.
I think what has kind of made it feel like it's on hold for me is whether this is the kind of thing that doesn't require an image spec rev, but rather somehow fits into artifacts as like a well understood type that gets registered. So that's why
I'm supposed to listen to that one. I didn't hear what you said.
Yeah, so that
encrypted layers is basically a different MIME type that not all clients are going to know what to do with.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's actually interesting. Is the sense of a specific artifact that the client runtimes are supposed to know about all the things it provides. So it actually becomes a domain of that type to think about.
So I pasted a link to it. The image spec 775. I was asked for review. I was asked for review last year sometime, and
yeah,
honestly, kind of waited until the dust settled, and I understand the use case and understand some of the secure enclave computing and all that kind of stuff. But as far as like what's needed as far as like special accommodation for this one particular use case, or is it like you just mentioned, Phil, something more generic for?
Yeah, I think the open question is, where do we reflect that this exists so that future implementers can handle it? And maybe that's handled by a entry in the artifacts repo, because this proposal came before artifacts.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the model that you would actually have a different runtime type? Like, would it be image encrypted or it's the same?
It's just
type,
that
it's
the
just a
layer,
different
it's
media.
just one of the layers wouldn't be. If open that link 775, I posted it in the HackMD.
Okay.
About third or fourth comment. I spoke to Brandon at some event or in person, I don't remember, but still, he is basically that he's introducing 2 or so different MIME types, and the meat of that one comment on September 16th spun off.
Sorry, which one is this?
Look in the HackMD 775. I posted a link.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Under image. Anyhow, the meat of the meat of this comment on September 16th by Lum JJB spun off a wildly different tangent that we got into of like the order of these things.
Oh,
should
yeah,
it just say encrypted, or should it say encrypted plus tar? Should it say encrypted plus tar gzip? Should it say, does order matter? And it just, because like, why are you compressing something that's encrypted, or is it compressed before it's encrypted, or?
So this becomes more a question of what the media type should be, as opposed to whether we should support the behavior.
And so, okay, so right, yeah, right. So there's 2 things. One is it's fundamentally just introducing a different MIME type that, in essence, is delivering a runnable layer that container runtimes should know what to do with that. But the truth is that only certain specialized and newer runtimes would even be able to recognize these MIME types and know what to do with them.
Right, and only if they're configured to.
Yep, and they know how to fetch keys and all manner of other things. Anyhow, and so in essence, it is like, yes, it is kind of an image spec, an image thing. It's delivering a container image, but in another sense, it is very much so like what the artifacts propose. Artifacts is doing, of like, here's a MIME type and here's a README to what a client should do if they are looking for or want to handle this MIME type.
But not as a first class MIME type, more as a suffix, right?
Yeah, suffix or an extension or something like that, like a specialized MIME type.
Yeah, but I think
he adds a few annotations for, how to find information about the keys and effectively a README on what those things mean, and then information on those MIME types.
Yeah, so to me, the discussion point for OCI is, now that artifacts showed up, do we need this pull request changing the image spec, or is an entry in the artifacts database, so to speak, sufficient? Because work has already long,
across
left the gate.
Stack.
Yeah, I mean, Creo supports it, Containerd supports it, their Kubernetes KEP is getting some traction. So, like, the work continues.
Secure enclaves and all that stuff.
Yeah, so the work is going. They just want to know, where do we put the MIME type in the description of what this all means.
So, looking at artifacts, where would it fit in over there? Artifacts.
So what I was working on is, you'd have these well-known types that you would submit, and there would be one specifically there for like the OCI runnable image. So in that one, you would express that here are some of the layers that you would support, and much like this other conversation we had, there's some layers you would optionally support. if you want to just put it as a, can you transfer issues yet on GitHub?
Not very long.
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
Yeah.
You can.
In the same org, it's pretty easy. So we could move that to artifacts.
But it's a PR, not an issue.
Oh, yeah.
And
Right.
it's got the codes.
Good point. I mean, I talk to Brandon regularly. I mean, we can ask him to open an issue, and yeah, we can figure out the right spot for it if necessary.
Derek, Steve, Mike, and Stephen Day on artifacts.
Yeah, I like it.
2 maintainers on here right now.
Just move it over and make it media type extensions. And
I would recommend. Let's. That's good stuff.
arguably, you need some kind of discussion in the image spec about media type extensions.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
It wouldn't be all this text. This would just be an example.
I'll make a comment here. Mike, you just said something. Will you open an issue on distribution spec for adding language around media type extension, not distribution, image spec? Will you open an issue on image spec for media type extension to point to artifacts?
Yep, drafting it now.
Okay.
You want to make it post or suggest post one or the next release? And I don't think it's release required, right? More of a best can do kind of thing, given that we're already working with annotations.
I'm going to use the kind of a cleanup for some of these things. All right, so I just made a comment on that. As a kind of a cleanup. I'm going to close this. I wonder why the tab indents are messing up so bad on HackMD.
I'm getting confused also here.
Oh my gosh.
Somebody inserted
What
something
are you
bad.
doing?
Wait, am you and I hitting each other?
I don't know. Some shenanigans happening. Larva. We're 5 minutes till close.
Oh, crap.
I know this second half has been thoroughly riveting for everybody. I appreciate your patience. There is something about this going through and cleaning house, and sometimes like discussions do get a little wild, and sometimes it just needs. I think this is something that even I, as a maintainer, will look at issues sometimes and be like, I feel bad for just closing some of these things because we do have such a policy for open discussion. And if somebody doesn't show up in these calls to discuss it, then it's like I'm not closing it because I feel like these things need to have a little bit of discussion. But by the same token, there's nobody standing up championing it. So consequently, some of these issues sit open for a long time, and we just occasionally need to prune a bit because, like, runtime spec and run C particularly have got a lot of open issues and a lot of open pull requests, and it's an exercise that is really best if people just open up and just start clicking through the issues when we do this, and it helps clean house. And even just you know, everybody as a community commenting on something of like, I think this can be closed, or I think this, you know, is still a valid conversation, or I think this has gone completely stale, helps kind of sort those things out. So feel free to do that anytime you look at stuff, and it would help any of us like bubble it up to the top so I don't have to take up a weekly call. But I'm all for using this time also for triage and cleaning house. Does anybody else have any other comments that they would like to add in the couple of minutes remaining? Steve and Mike, you are the only two on the call that are maintainers on the artifacts. It looks like y'all got a few PRs open, but
I'm on it.
y'all.
I'm trying to get some time. I'm going to work on it today.
I get it. I'm not harping on that because we all suffer from that problem. It's the same kind of thing of when PRs are being opened by the maintainers that are LGTMing them. It's kind of a funky workflow. We should probably address as a TOB at some point.
Oh, to get more feedback on them?
Well, A, to feedback is good, but B, when it's the maintainers that are making the PRs that it still requires two other maintainers to LGTM it. So sometimes as the maintainers, as we're talking about things, it's harder for us to make changes than the community. Like if the community makes a PR, then it's pretty quick. Two fairly active maintainers can jump on it. But if you only have two fairly active maintainers and one of them makes the PR, then it languishes.
Yeah, so Mike's been awesome in helping, and others have wanted to, just didn't have bandwidth. I did reach out to Stephen Day. He's obviously pretty busy. He just had a kid also. And I do have an idea for some other maintainers on artifacts to try to get more progress there.
We could probably do a working session if you like, Steve.
Yeah. I'm just hoping to catch up on some stuff. I want to get some notary stuff in today, and then I was going to work on the artifacts.
While we're on that topic, actually, I just hear I'm adding one to the image spec 770. Is that PR even needed anymore?
Looking at it. Is this a change FAQ? What am I asking for here?
This is like pre-artifacts repo.
Yeah, we can just close. I'll look quick at this. I'm assuming we can just close it. I opened it, so I should be able to close my own.
Too quick.
Done.
All right. All right. So we're at 1 minute. So thanks everybody for calling in, and yeah, continue to conversation on the mailing list and otherwise. So I think this has been productive. It's all incremental. So
Yep. Thanks.
Oh, actually, Vincent, you still there?
yes, sir.
I'm looking at this one because we actually did this January of 19. So this was actually after it. I think this is adding some content to the image spec that says it's like one of the types of artifacts from the artifact spec. So it's kind of like a back pointer to the work in flight. This wasn't pre, it was post.
But it creates an artifacts directory with content where I assume now you'd want just a link to it? Or?
Well, I think this is also wrapped up in the question of, do we split up the image spec into sections like I think distribution spec is? One's split up, one's not. So I think I was trying to make changes here in a separate, like a separate markdown file. So I can go back and look at it. Like I said, I'm scrubbing the all the feedback I got from artifacts anyway, so I can add this to
it
the
looks
list.
like it's doing the theme of what the artifacts repo would be doing, but within the directory of the image spec. Because in the PR, not everything. There's no links or references at all to the artifacts repo. It actually creates new files.
Yeah.
So
Let me look at it
but
let me just give me today or tomorrow. If it's there next week, we'll just close it.
You can reopen it if you need to.
Or I could reopen it. Okay. Fair enough.
Okay.
All right, later.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.